We are live. Ignore the fact that the loop almost started a second time around. We're here to chat about the TV that we watched for the last, it's almost 3 weeks at this point, Kate, isn't it? It's been a hot minute. We've had holidays. I don't even know. There's been a lot. And I will say, I think we have more TV just in terms of sheer volume, number of episodes to talk about this week than we have in a while, possibly ever. Because we both did quite a bit of television marathoning over the holidays. So I'm very excited about that. But before we get into any of that, Kate, hi, how are you? And do you come bearing news?
I'm great, and I come bearing a lot of news. So,
Yes.
to start off with, just days after our last one, I found out about a movie called A Cha Cha Real Smooth, which is going to star Dakota Johnson, and
Okay.
it's about a young man that meets a woman and her daughter at a bat mitzvah.
Okay.
And the reason I was so interested in that is I am very much getting interested in Dakota Johnson. I think she's doing great. And then also it's going to be soundtracked once again by Haim, and I just have to tell that every time it happens. On the other front, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel season 4 comes out on February 18th. So excited
Okay.
for that one.
I
Uh,
am
we
thrilled
got
about that. I couldn't quite remember what season we're on, but I'm excited. Do we know, is this the final season of Miss Maisel?
I don't know. It might
Okay.
be, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Um, we also got a Multiverse of Madness trailer over the break. That movie comes out May 6th, and just based on the trailer, me and Cammie, we don't lose. We don't know how that
Never.
feels. We will tell
I
you when we eventually reach that. But as of
Everybody
yet,
wanted
we
to
have
know what I
not
would do if
lost.
I didn't win. I guess we'll never know.
Yes. Uh, I for Shadow and Bone, they are about to or have just started season 2 production, and it's looking like a release date of 2023. So we're still a way out from that, but it's exciting to at least hear that they're getting into filming again.
You know what? They can take their
Uh,
sweet time with Shadow and Bone because they need time to rewrite the entire story before they give it to me.
that's fair. That's fair because we both read all the books and we know how much work they have to do here.
Right.
They did a really good job on the first one, so hopefully they can put the time in to do it again.
Hmm.
Um, Bridgerton season 2 comes out March 25th. We're both excited, hesitantly excited about that one. uh, and a series I mentioned previously, The Legend of Vox Machina, which is a animated adaptation of a D&D game,
Okay.
it was originally supposed to be airing in February. It'll now be airing at the end of January, so it's got moved
Ooh.
up. So everything I'm very excited about.
That is very exciting. D&D. I know a gentleman who will be very excited about that. Well, you mentioned Multiverse of Madness, which really brings us into Marvel territory. And I want to start with Hawkeye because at the time that we last left off, at the time that we were last talking, a billion years ago or
Mhm.
December 17th or whatever it was, we were still awaiting the finale of Hawkeye, and we had a lot of speculation on what we wanted to see. And, the bar was on the floor because we, or maybe just me, had watched the 5 episode crossover for Flash and all of that. So we were like, okay, surely Hawkeye can top this. And we got the finale. And since then, I've just been wanting to know what you thought. I know it's been a minute, but did it live up to your expectations? What did you think of the finale?
I think the finale definitely lived up to the expectations set from the episode before that. I think it was. I would say that it's the second best Disney show that we've gotten from Disney Plus show that we've gotten from Marvel. I think
Ooh.
it did a great job introducing uh, Kate and kind of more fleshing out Yelena, and also giving us a little more context into Clint because he's been around since the original, like some of the first movies, and he's the character we probably know the least about. So whether you liked him or not, it gave you more context and it made him a more human character. Ironically, being that he was one of the few people that were purely human.
Yeah, I went into this not only not caring about Clint, but actively being okay with him dying. And I'm not going to say that for me, he became like this super interesting whatever, but that doesn't matter because I'm not the target audience. But if I try to be I'm the target audience of the show. I'm not the target audience of Clint. I guess I should make that caveat. But I would say that by the finale, they really succeeded in making me see him as like a whole human, a whole complex human. And even though I was there for Kate and Yelena, or however you pronounce her name, I still began to appreciate multiple other characters, which is for me not my MO. So if even somebody like me, who I tend to be like, here's the three I care about, and I'm not even going to spend mental energy on anybody else. If somebody like me can become interested in other characters, I would imagine that if you went into this already a Clint fan, or you went into this already like a Marvel's Avengers type of fan, that this was very rewarding, and it makes me excited that we'll get a season 2. And I will say, what one of the scenes that I really enjoyed from the finale was her and her mom with Kingpin, when they're both essentially fighting Kingpin kind of back and forth, like he's distracted between the two of them. I thought that that's something that felt very comic booky to me in terms of the staging. Like first he's going after her mom, and then he's distracted, and then you can almost like see a page flip and he's suddenly like turning over. It felt very comic booky in a very rewarding way without being cheesy. And throughout that scene, we got a lot of really good information about the differences between her and her mom in terms of like morality, which is very rewarding to get out of what is otherwise a very cheesy fight scene. So that was a scene that I was like, oh, I really, this is cool. This is exciting. Love the reveal at the end with his wife. I hate the trope of like the wife of the hero stays at home and you never see her and she has no story. So I like that they're at least, making a nod to her potentially having a story. So I'm excited to see where they go in season 2. It was very good.
Yeah, I don't know if they're actually doing a season 2 or not, but this is definitely a show I would like to, and has a lot of
I
potential
thought
to
season 2 was
for him to.
confirmed. My heart is crushed.
I
See,
don't know.
this is what
It
I
might
get
be. I
for
might have
not
missed that.
ever reading any news.
It might be confirmed. I might have missed that, but I think there's potential there for like second season, third season anyway, where it slowly does transition over to it being Kate being the mantle and her like having a weird sisterly dynamic with Kate, or not with Kate, with Yelena, and kind of them developing into the new Hawkeye and Black Widow
Mm-hmm.
kind of characters. And then whenever they have to be drawn into the bigger movie crossovers, they play a similar role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see more from them. I like the presence of Delana and the finale, and also shout out to that moment. I know I keep calling out favorite moments, but I swear this is the last one, when Kate and Yelena are fighting and Kate's like, "This is Christmas. Can we just stop and get a drink?" I was like, love it. Would watch an entire episode of them getting a drink. They did not, however,
Love
stop
that.
and get a drink.
Yeah, I love that. And then I love where like Kate throws that thing and it knocks Kate or Yelena's hand down, and they both kind of have to compliment each other on their fighting skills, and then they're like, "Stop making me like you." I liked that one a lot.
Yes. It
The
was
elevator too.
it
The
it was giving very like drunk girl in the bathroom energy. You know what I mean? But like high off of the
yes,
endorphins from the fight. Um I will say, while it was cute that like, oh, she goes and spends Christmas with his family, you know what I would have preferred? Her spending Christmas with Yelena. Because as near as we can figure, Yelena spent Christmas by herself. Kate is obviously like not estranged from her mom, but kind of estranged from her mom, however you want to see it. It would have been cute to see Kate and Yelena doing like a little like boxed mac and cheese type of Christmas. I thought that would have been very nice. And it felt very soon for Clint to be bringing home this like random, like, I don't know, teen, young adult, however old she's supposed to be to his family. Like, I'm a big fan of found family, like, not knocking that at all. It just, I don't know. That felt a little soon, especially when there was an alternative option to me. But
I think I was fine with it because I kind of always saw that as the ending outcome. Like they were putting so much pressure on him getting back to Christmas and for Christmas Day.
mm-hmm,
And for as much that could go wrong, it just felt like that was something that was going to go right. And
mm-hmm,
for her to be like the one that was really trying to apologize for making him have to stay, like wanting him to be able to get this done so he can get back to his family, to me, it made sense that she was there. But I fully agree with you that it would have also been great to see like her spend it with Elena. So either one really works for me. It's just I think I was already on board with seeing that from the get go.
mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why I didn't really notice that as a weird thing.
You're right. Like it totally makes sense. I think it's also because like I watched this around the same time that I was marathoning The Witcher, which we're about to get to in a second. And I think I was just like oversaturated on not necessarily just found family, but kind of like
But
found
adopted father.
father. Like it was very, I don't know. Is their target audience people with daddy issues? Like I anyways, clearly Netflix has like figured out that this formula is working for people, but there was just like a lot of content back to back of like what if a fatherly male showed up in your life and helped you through things? And I was like, what if you went to therapy? But, you know, that's neither here nor there. Then you have Wheel of Time, which is mommy issues. So, like, equal representation at least, you know. I told Kate in advance I wasn't going to say anything dicey and controversial. So let me step back. All right. Next, speaking of dicey and controversial, Kate, since we last spoke, you not only continued reading Wheel of Time, which I certainly did not do, you marathoned all of Wheel of Time season one Amazon. Okay. Since we last spoke, the only thing I hadn't seen at that point was the finale. So I've seen the finale, you've seen everything. So before I get into finale thoughts, what do you think of everything? Like book that you've read so far, the whole series on Amazon. Did it meet your expectations?
I read the first book, and part of it, my mistake was probably reading it after a book that I already found kind of slow and boring. But I found the book, I could see what the goal was, I could enjoy aspects of it, but I found it very slow and very boring. And it was very much written. And I don't know if you can tell this, but sometimes I can read a male written book and tell that they're really trying really hard to do really well by the female characters, and they're just not
Yes.
getting there.
Yes.
Like, I can
And that really
appreciate the
translated
effort.
in the first couple episodes of the Amazon.
Yes.
Like I had to desensitize the fact that I'm like, oh my goodness, you're trying way too hard, like way too hard.
Like, I could appreciate the effort put into trying to make dynamic female characters of all different wants, desires, ilk, background, whatever. But it was just like it was still very one dimensional in how many different versions of a cookie cutter like stereotype trope you could make for women.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not mad about it. I was just like it could have been so much better. There was so much potential with this concept, and it felt very hollow to me in
Mm-hmm.
the book. In the show, I would say that there's a bit more, I think there's a little bit more magnitude of dynamic nature within the women, but not by much. And I think a lot of that comes down to the acting. I think Rosamund Pike is a force to be reckoned with. So I think she brought something very large and both like she was cold like she was supposed to be, but it wasn't as like maniacal or as like I don't know, not maniacal, but like there's always this heartless, non-maternal at all kind of cookie cutter description of what this person would have been, like this character type would it be. And she did bring this like a little bit of like, I do genuinely care for you guys, but I cannot baby you. We're going to like our ultimate death. And there was a little bit more room to breathe and actually appreciate the female characters in the show. I still didn't have a great time watching it. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't the best fantasy show I've ever seen. And, you know, some really starchy potato that won the title of Dragon Reborn.
Here's the thing. Before we even get into the fact that, like, of course it's the most boring Abercrombie model who's the Dragon Reborn. Like, of course it is. Before we even get into that, here was kind of like my progression while watching it. Like, having vaguely heard of the story, you know, for the last 10 years, but tuning out all of it, frankly. I'm like, okay, I'm watching this show. And I'm going into it with a good attitude, by the way, which is like, okay, maybe that's like a grain of rice good attitude for me, but that's better than nothing. And I'm like, okay, there's a matriarchy, wonderful, great, love it, like written by a man, but it's gonna be, there's a matriarchy, there's tons of they're very powerful. Okay, good, they've got powers. The matriarchy wants to just destroy men. Okay, good. But how do, oh, and all of the women bond together and they all hate men. Okay, we're go, that's a little, and also if men touch the power, women destroy. All right, okay. And you know, at this point I'm like, how old's the author? Where is he from? Did he ever see a therapist? Does he have a rap sheet? Did anybody marry this man? Has he ever been told good job by a mother in his life? Like, it's just like, it just takes such a turn where I'm like, you didn't have to go that far with the in your face metaphors. And you and I have talked about, with lesser shows, with weaker shows, how sometimes we'll struggle with something where, you know, like, I know the authors and I are on the same page, but they're just going over the top with the metaphor. Like, they're going over the top with whatever, like, their message is, and they don't know how to do anything like subtly. It's just like, you took current events, you put a different face on it, and you're telling the exact same story. You didn't like transform it or do anything that would, like, you know, like, you've got me because I'm on your side, whatever, but you didn't do anything that would like bring people in or teach them a different lesson. At first, I thought that's the direction this was going. Like, at first, I thought this was going the direction of like, you know, this is going to be some over in your face metaphor for like, here's why women should have power. But then it like takes such a turn, and not in a like, it takes a turn in a screechier, cringier direction. I say, having enjoyed the series, don't get me wrong, didn't love it, but enjoyed it. It just takes a turn in this direction of like, I really feel like the guy at home is like writing this being like, women should have power and destroy men and step on me and don't look at what I'm hiding in my closet. Like, I just feel like he's got some stuff that I didn't need to hear about going on. But enjoyed the female characters, certainly based on the fact that it's like, you know, I'm watching the Amazon version. I did not read the books. It has been transformed, and I can only assume there's certain elements that are even cringier in the books. But as you said, with Rosamund Pike, with all, almost all, we're just going to graciously say all, with all of the female cast, but certainly Rosamund Pike, there's just a lot of complexity brought to the characters that even if the words alone are a little bit either bland or kind of like, I don't know what metaphor you're going for, but I almost don't want to know, it still comes across really intriguing, engaging.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great display of world building, and I would say a majority of the characters have a great, especially in the show once, and I assume they're pulling from things I haven't read from the book yet, but they add so much complexity to the characters, except for the specific character, Rand. When you get to know people, they are like dynamic characters. They have range, they have complexity to them. I think the character that I was most intrigued about their actual story and where they're headed is Perrin.
Mm-hmm.
just because of like the tragedy, and yet he's like he is the definition of gentle giant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has so much that he could be explored with that character. Same with oh, I've forgotten everybody's names.
Matt,
But the other two, well, I was thinking of the other two women. The
Nynaeve,
two,
and you. What starts?
yes, Egwene.
Egwene.
Nynaeve and Egwene. Yeah, I can see where they're going to try to put them in positions that are going to be challenging for their views and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I see where all these character developments are going to have potential and growth and everything else, but there is a certain amount of absolutism and like overdone with how specific the magic system is that it kind of gets a little convoluted, and it makes the whole metaphor very confusing and a little heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm. It's, I feel like you kind of have to pick one. Like, you can be heavy handed with a metaphor. That's one of my least favorite things personally, but I do know some viewers enjoy it. There is an audience who does want like a heavy overt metaphor. That's fine. But you can do that and do it, you know, in a successful, intriguing way that you might lose some audience, but you'll gain some. And if you have good characters, you can make up for it. I think, and I'm super biased because I grew up with it, but I think a good example of this is like the whole Narnia franchise. That is a very overt, in your face, like smack you over the head with like it's barely a metaphor, you know, like it's all but, you know, a sort of pseudo biblical retelling type of thing. So you're going to lose some people either because they don't like an overt metaphor or because they, you know, don't resonate with that like cultural or spiritual aspect. But it became so popular to a large extent because it had really intriguing characters and it had really fun fantasy elements to where if you like the metaphor or you're at least neutral to the metaphor, you can still get really engaged in this world. With this, the metaphor is very over the top. I'm not sure who he's reaching out to, but it just seems like guys with some sort of hang up in regards to powerful women, like they both fantasize about and dislike powerful women. And I will acknowledge, I think that's a really large part of the male population. So I am not surprised that this is a bestseller. Like, I get it. We have all met a guy or many or majority of guys in the world who have some sort of hang up about powerful women but also love them, and you know, pour one out. Okay, I get it. But as as a female viewer, and B, as somebody who doesn't love an overt metaphor, and if I did, that might not be the metaphor I would particularly find engaging. I need like really good, engaging characters. And they give me some, but then they tell me Rand is the lead. And I'm like, now you lost me again. Didn't really lose me. I'm going to keep watching this. Don't get me wrong. Like, as long as Rosamund Pike is there, I'm there. But you know what else they could do to bring me in? A good romance. You know what they don't have? A good romance. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I said what I
I
said.
I agree because like the the only one that seemed like they were going to pursue it for half a moment was the Lan and the Neve one,
Oh,
and I was
yeah.
like, no, don't like that one. I don't like that one, and I don't like Rand and Egwene. I
Right.
could kind of see what they were trying to do with Egwene and Perrin, but Egwene very much is not into that, and
Mm-hmm.
Perrin is very much like protect him at all costs. Don't put him through that pain. So I was like, I didn't really care for any of the major romances. I think because they were all like so obviously not going to happen
Mm-hmm.
that I just couldn't make myself care.
I think so like the Rand and Egwene thing, dislike because A, he's boring. B, she's at her worst when she's around him. And C, like I don't believe in the moonlighting curse, but I don't like something like shoved in my face as like destiny from I don't know. Like there was too much telling and not enough showing. They were like, let me tell you how much they love each other, but then they have like no chemistry. But whatever. I don't really feel like Rand had chemistry with anybody except for Moiraine, and not in a romantic way. He did not have romantic chemistry with Moiraine. She's way too old for him. I'm not into it, like not in that way, but like in their scenes, just probably because Rosamund Pike is such a good actress. Like that was the only time he had something close to charisma, and even then it was like you need a few more seasons before you're really there. I wonder if he's like a somewhat unseasoned actor. I know they cast a lot of like new people for this. So I don't know if he like doesn't have a lot of filmography or experience under his belt, and like, you know, this is his escalator to the top or whatever. But they just at this point they would have to cast like a really good actress, I think, for one of his spoiler 3 romances he'll have throughout this season who are not Egwene, throughout this show, this series, whatever. They'll have to cast a really good one for at least one of the 3 for me to actually like be into it. I vaguely know, because like having heard about the books a lot, I vaguely know like the 3 personas of who he will have a romance with. We've met one of them, but there's 2 more that we have not met. That one of the 2 is like hinted at in the end with the pirate ship thing, and then there's one we haven't met and has not been hinted at yet. And at this point, the first one that we did meet, 0 romantic chemistry. I'm sure she's lovely, but that's not going to work out for me. Pirate ship chick, who knows? So like it's going to be one of the last 2, or it's going to be nobody. And I know that he's central enough to the story to where, unless they wildly deviate from the books, which I hope they do, I don't know that there's going to be another romance that gets enough screen time to like get me into this for the romance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page with you there. I don't want to like downsay it or say anything bad about it, but I want it to turn out well. I want to enjoy it. It's got potential, but right now there's actually very few characters I care about. I think Land, to be honest, has potential just because we don't know much about him. So there's a wide canvas of exploration there for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then Perrin is obviously like he's going to have a lot of moral dilemmas, and same with Matt on a whole other side. So they're going to be very interesting characters to me, along with all the women have great potential, but we'll have to see how well they continue to adapt it and kind of streamline this like 14 book series or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to take a blood pressure break from that and mention the other Netflix thing that that's not even Netflix. That was Amazon. Okay, the Netflix thing that I watched over Christmas break was Emily in Paris. You didn't watch that, right?
No.
Fair enough. Okay, so season 1 won an Emmy. No idea why. Everybody remains confused about that. Season 2, can I just say, I have to give them a little bit of credit for something. Okay. Season 2, the entire like season long, they from the very beginning are hinting about at some point, and there's like a good few love triangles throughout. There's love triangles with her and multiple guys. There's love triangles with the baker and multiple girls, and you know, some other characters as well, friends and stuff, whatever. There's just a lot, like the whole thing is love triangles. Okay, but the entire time, and this is I don't know, I would say it's like a 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. type of show, like where they can show moderate sex scenes, but it's not like R in your face. The entire season, they're hinting that a menage a trois, a threesome or whatever is coming. And I'm like, just shoot me in the head now. Like I don't like those storylines. I'm so sorry. Call me a prude. Again, we've talked about the fact that like I find most sex scenes cringe, but I particularly find things like that just to be cringe to watch. Do whatever you want in real life. I find that so cringe. It tends to ruin any romance for me. It does ruin any romance for me because I just find any romance beyond that point mildly unbelievable. I just, no. Okay, I'm so sorry. Grandma doesn't love it. Anyways, they go the whole season and they don't do it. It is the biggest tease the entire time. At multiple points, you think it's going to happen. It never happens. At the end, I was like, I don't even care that the plot was boring. I don't even care that we didn't get as many like French setting scenes, whatever. At least I didn't have to sit through that. Thank you. That's all. Maybe watch Emily in Paris because it could be worse. All right. We're in Witcherland.
Yes.
Speaking of Netflix. And you and I both marathoned Witcher Season 2 over Christmas. In my notes, I have described it as the perfect Christmas marathon. And indeed, I had a absolutely lovely time marathoning Witcher with my family over Christmas. What did you think of Witcher Season 2, particularly as compared to Season 1?
I think it's one of those things that very rarely do I think shows do really well when they change up how they're telling the story in such a drastic way. Because in season one, it's three separate timelines until they all finally kind of intersect at that final moment. Um, Whereas this, it's all relatively the same timeline. Now you're just jumping back between different people and their main stories, but it's also far less episodic. So the first season was extremely episodic at the very beginning, until like maybe the last two episodes. It was consistently telling like a story based around a creature, and like the characters get to know each other through that. And I know that has in part because of like the source material they're pulling. The first season was pulling mainly from the two collection books, and then the rest of the show is probably going to be more from the actual like central story. But I thought that was very interesting, and it was interesting to me that it still felt like the same show, because normally shows will do that, and it feels like a clunky transition or different, but it felt like the same show, just better. Like it had the same tone, but I got more of what I enjoyed. I got more Yennefer exploring all of her decisions. I got more of uh, Geralt being the surprisingly like knightly man, even though he swears he's not going to be a knight and everything else, but he's basically is. And I got things I didn't know I wanted. I got a whole lot of Yasker and Yennefer being the ultimate friend duo.
Yes.
And I got, it was one of those things that when I was watching it, I was like, of course this makes sense for her story. But getting to see people of power be without power, people that are used to not having any power have way too much power, those parallels were so wonderful to watch because it told such a great story of those people specifically, as well as how they represent like what power does to people, and what kind of people can take power and do well with it or do evil with it.
I could not have said it better myself. I will say what surprised me this season was I thought this was the type of show where I'm going to be here for number one, certain characters. And by certain characters, I mean Yennefer and to a lesser extent Ciri, but still Ciri. And this is going to be the show where I'm here for certain pairings, romantic or otherwise, but certain pairings. I'm on board with the Geralt and Yennefer thing, although, it was kind of touch and go there in season one. I'm like, okay, let's get me to root for them, whatever. I liked Geralt and Yaskier, however you pronounce his name. I liked their friendship duo. So I was like, okay, because coming out of season one, I just thought I liked their friendship duo. Coming into season two, some of what I thought I liked got kind of deconstructed and surprised me. So, for example, I don't actually care for Geralt and Yaskier, as a friendship duo. I literally just like Yaskier and Jaskier. How do you pronounce his name?
Yaskier.
Okay, that whatever it is.
J is a Y.
Yaskier. Okay, cool. They say it multiple times, but do I listen? No. Okay. So I don't actually care for him with Gerald. That's when he's at his least like dynamic and least funny. Like it's fine. Those were my favorite scenes out of season 1, but getting to see him by himself infinitely better. Getting to see him with Yennefer infinitely better. Getting to see him do literally anything else but follow Gerald around infinitely better. Then I was like, okay, I like Gerald and Yennefer, but they've got a lot of selling me to go before I'm like really on board with them. Like there was just like a lot of like just kind of questionable. I'm not even going to say questionable because like different strokes for different folks, but it just wasn't my typical like perfect ship to get me on board. They just both happen to be like, I believe I used the term oppressively hot. They're like, they're both so pretty. They've got the personalities to where I'm like, I know I could be on board with this, but like, you got to give me a little more, right? The premise, right? Getting to see them separately, I actually liked better, which isn't to say I wouldn't still be on board with the ship. I am to an extent. The season did not move the ship forward for me at all. And I have some problems with how they wrote both of them. But I started to like some of these separations. And my number one complaint in ensemble shows, example, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., is when they take certain pairings that I want to see together, for example, Fitzsimmons, and they have them apart for too long. Oliver and Felicity is the same thing. Oliver and Diggle, Felicity and Oliver. Like I know I'm using Arrow, but that's like just a really convenient example to use. Same thing in Suits, same thing in any like show I've watched a lot of. If I have certain faves, I want to see them together, and then I want to tune out the scenes when they're not together. And this, I liked all 3 characters better separately. All of them. Thank you for listening.
I don't think I felt it quite as aggressively as like I liked them all by themselves, truly separated. I think there's you have a little bit more of a hang up with Yennefer, and especially Yennefer and Geralt's story, than I do. There's just something about it that I do like. Part of it might be because I've read some of the books, not all of them, but I've read some of them. I enjoy that one, and I can admit like it's got some problems that both of us would normally critique about how they both will make decisions, grandiose decisions that impact both of them, and not ask, not say anything, just make the decision. That they have more hurt than helped each other on several occasions. But I think what makes me interested in that is because neither of them ever like hurt each other with a malicious intent. They're not enemies to lovers. They're just like two people on two separate paths that keep in like it's almost more star-crossed than enemies to lovers to me. Which is not still typically not something I enjoy, but there's something about how they're doing it that I like. Is it my top ship of all time? No, but I do enjoy it. Plus, they are both oppressively attractive. We can agree.
Right.
We were talking before by ourselves at one point, talking about how we had a little bit of an issue with how they wrote Yennefer. And I don't actually have any of the issue of the general storyline. I really liked her general storyline. I liked that was going to make the decision, and she thought she was going to sacrifice Ciri. And you can see the whole ride there that she's really in her head about, am I going to do this or not? I liked that, but I think that they were telling so many stories with so many characters, and they introduced a lot of characters that were tertiary at best in season 1 and are now more like secondary characters in season 2. And so they were developing those stories a lot more, and it actually took away time from the three characters I really cared about. So they didn't have enough time to put the nuance on that series of events that I think they could have. Now, do I think what she was going to do was wrong? Do I fully support Geralt being pissed at her? So totally, I totally get it. But I think there's a potential to vilify her in such an intense way that I think if they had put more nuance on it and gone like, there are plenty of characters in here that we rate as good characters that would have killed somebody innocent in a blink of an eye if it meant that it was protecting themselves or somebody they cared about. But it's because it was it was one of the 3 main characters hurting one of the other 3 main characters in such a specific way that it felt so much more of an offense. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought that maybe if we could have had more time to fully get into her headspace, we could have actually seen that switch in her mind. That would have been better, because there was a long, like, that was one that felt kind of rushed, and while I could appreciate it and got where they were going so I could still enjoy it, I think that there was something to be said for if they had left a little bit more room for development there, it could have been better.
Yeah. My problem with Yennefer, not her, but her writing, specifically towards the end, was not even so much that she was going to do a bad thing. I like when female characters are going to do a bad thing. And even in this fantasy world, if you're going to do a very bad thing, which is like sacrifice another character, I would say sacrifice another child, but it's not a child. Like, it's a fully grown adult, but that's a whole other problem. She's going to sacrifice another character. And it's not the fact that it's a character that Geralt cares about. And it's not the fact that it's a character who is, by all accounts, good. Ciri is good. We are told that she is good. We are, for the most part, shown that she is good. It's that she is written in such a way that she goes from strongly not caring what Geralt thinks to the point that she is about to sacrifice Ciri, to later being willing to like sacrifice herself, her own life, essentially her own body for Ciri, and we're not walked to that in between point Y. And then she is shown as really strongly, desperately wanting Geralt's forgiveness for all of this. And all three of those things are three very strong choices. And I just want to be better walked into that choice for her. How did she get from A to B and B to C? I don't have an ethical problem with any of this because A, this is fantasy, and B, I don't need for her to be good. She could be bad and slaying armies and slaying the innocent, whatever. And if she's engaging, I'm going to like her. If she's engaging and hot, I'm going to like her even more. So, like, that's not the problem. I just wish there was more there. And we spent a lot of the season, and I know Geralt's the main character and Ciri's the main character, whatever. We spent a lot of the season walking in detail from moral point A to moral point B to moral point C for Geralt and Ciri. But for Yennefer, it was more so her struggling with the fact that she lost her powers. And then when she's actually making choices on what she's going to do about that, we don't get walked from point A to point B. The only time in this season 2 where I felt as a viewer I was sufficiently walked into her choice, it wasn't even through words, but when she didn't behead whatever that guy is, then I felt like they had walked me through her choice and I understood it. And it wasn't that they had to spell it out in dialogue. I just understood her choice. I understood why she would or she wouldn't in that point. So her action then like communicated. It was great. And maybe that just set high expectations for later. Maybe I, as the viewer, am missing it being spelled out, but that's what I wish I had, not a change to what she did.
Well, and I think it also, because it kind of highlights the power of one single line, how much a singular line can shape the entirety of what the message. Because when you're referring to the part where she decides to free Kahir instead of kill him, she had said before that if she did execute Kahir, it would make her the killer. And I can see there's part of her, she doesn't like senselessly killing people. She's not a terrible human. She doesn't murder people for fun. But I also don't see her having an issue with, like, killing somebody for her own skin.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, how they had initially said it before was kind of, they didn't want you to know, especially like going into that scene, they wanted you to be like, she could do either. Because they had even stakes of if she freed him, she's basically like implying herself to be with Nilfgaard, and if she beheads him, then she's a killer and she would have been capable and like everything else. So it was more of a decision of what tactically is most useful.
Mm-hmm.
And even still, there's this question of why specifically she chose to do what she did until she and Kahira are getting on the horse, and Kahira says, like, you saved me. And she goes, don't get straight in your head about it. I was saving me. And it was that line that clarified why she did what she did.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't necessarily because she didn't think he deserved to die. She really didn't care. It's not because that she wasn't capable of killing him or anything like that. It was simply because she saw that as the strategically stronger choice.
Mm-hmm.
When we get to the end of the season, I think if they had framed just a line or two better about, like, it had switched because her two big pinnacle goals is that she wants to feel powerful because of all the things that she experienced in the past. She enjoys the power because she was for so long powerless. And then also, she doesn't quite know the words to put it to, but she wants to not only be cared for, she doesn't just want the love of a child, of a partner, whatever. She wants to be able to give that love. Mm-hmm. And so the experience of getting to take Ciri and trying to teach her is finally this time where those two passions of hers, those two desires that she's desperately wanted and never been able to fully communicate, like, converge. And you get to see, like, you do get to see small moments, and I think the acting really enforces this, that we get to see when she kind of realizes, I can't kill her. She is everything I've wanted. She represents the power that I so desperately desire. She represents the ability to train and to comfort and love other people that I've also wanted. And so she decides not to kill Ciri, not for Geralt, for Ciri and for herself. And I think then when she starts to be super worried about how mad Geralt's going to be and wanting to apologize to Geralt, they could have changed two lines. Like, yeah, of course she didn't want to hurt Geralt, but changing like one or two lines to be more about, I never wanted to hurt Ciri in this way. I've messed up. I just threw away the chance of everything I ever wanted. If she framed it more like that, mm-hmm. I think that whole entire storyline would have been so much more succinctly presented.
Mm-hmm. For me, that would have helped me as a viewer understand it better. But again, I like Yennefer, even as portrayed, even with some dots not connect. Well, the dots connect. It's the journey between them. Like, I understand what she chose. Mm-hmm. I'll defend what she chose, but you know, for me, I was wanting a little more context, particularly by the end when she wants forgiveness from Geralt so much. I'm like, I understand this in a shippy context. She loves him, he loves her, she wants things to be right between them, whatever. But given her prior choices, I wasn't sure we needed that point C right now. I would have preferred to see that point C later. And also, I just don't love seeing her in a position where she's going to have to, like,
she had to apologize for surviving.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes. And I don't love seeing her in a position where she's having to do, like, free unpaid maternal labor in order to get the affection of this guy, as if he's not done bad things himself. I don't know. Something about it felt like a weird power imbalance that I wasn't into. And I'm not even like, there can be power imbalances in ships that I like, by the way. I'm not here trying to say, like, oh, I want a healthy ship dynamic or nothing. I like all kinds of toxic ship dynamics. That can entertain me any day. But the power imbalance between the two of them, I think, was, like, unsatisfying to me at the end, because what makes their chemistry good is that they are both, like, powerful forces, like, clashing. You know, again, like you said earlier, it's not necessarily enemies to lovers. It's more so, like, really strong forces that don't necessarily mix well to lovers. And I saw her become, like, be asked to be weak at the end, or at least that was my interpretation, and I didn't love that. But I'm sure they're going to patch it up in season 3. It's fine. Still like them. Yeah. They're still pretty.
Yeah, I think the scene where she apologized, or like is trying to explain to him, would have been so much better next season. I actually liked that she tried to sacrifice herself for Siri because that kind of connects why she changed her mind so much for Siri. But I think really if they just took the Geralt out of the equation a little bit more
Yeah.
for why she changed, like why she so drastically changed, I think it would have been better.
Yeah. Well, I have a little segment on here called What Trash Should You Watch Next? Now, recall, I did not recommend that you watch Emily in Paris. I just gave them kudos for not satisfying any audience member except me, insofar as I can tell. However, I was debating between which show I should recommend this week, and it was between Selling Tampa, which I marathoned towards the beginning of the holiday break, which is the sequel to Selling Sunset, and it's a bunch of realtors, and Tampa. I about said Miami like a whole dumbass. It's literally in the title, Cammie, get it together. But they do go to Miami in the middle of the season, in my defense. Bishop's about to walk in front of the camera. Did you hear him loudly meow? Do you see his
Yes.
tail right there? Lovely. Thank you, Bishop. So there was Selling Tampa, and that's great. And I just watched the latest season at the end of Christmas break, for the most part, of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Bishop, can I help you? Is this what you want? There you go. There. He's digging under my shiny keyboard. And I've decided It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is what I should recommend because it is the only good comedy I watched in all of 2021. I'm leaning.
You've turned off the microphone, I think.
I have?
Something has.
Can you hear me now?
I can. It switched microphone sources. I can hear you now. It cut out for a minute.
Is it this one?
I don't think so.
Is it this one?
Yes.
Oh, lovely. Well, that's because Bishop is sitting on my keyboard and mic setup. Anyways, hopefully you can still hear me. All I'm saying is watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's the best comedy I've watched this year, and Selling Tampa ends up being kind of depressing and not comedic, and I feel really bad for all these women because they all have terrible love lives, and while the women of Selling Sunset are for the most part terrible with a couple exceptions, at least they have like somebody who loves them and somebody they love, whereas for Selling Tampa, like even the relationships that seem good just like carry bad vibes, and almost none of them have good relationships, and yeah. Watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I also want to mention that the This Is Us final season just started. First episode just started airing. And I just want to wish them the best. And I hope that Kevin dies. And let's just all cheers to that together. Also, The Bachelor's back. The Bachelorette finale happened after we last spoke. She got with the Hawkeye, as she should. She really just collected a huge win. She got with the Hawkeye. They gave her the money for down payment of the house. She's not quitting her job to like become an Instagram seller of FabFitFun. She's not only sticking with her job, she is studying for her master's or like applying to master's programs or whatever and wants to become a principal. And I'm very happy for her. And that was one of the most successful seasons of Bachelorette I've seen. And now we have a new season of The Bachelor where his last brain cell is fighting for his life. Bless his heart. He is the dumbest person I've ever seen on this show, but he's really hot. So like himbo rights, it's fine. I'm gonna let him do whatever, you know. Literally all of these girls, the second they met him, you could see it on their face too. You could see them being like, oh, he's this. He played football. He got hit one too many times. This poor guy. But he's really hot, so it's okay.
Okay.
That's all. I now toss it to you, Kate, to either tell me what we should be watching this week or to tell me what you've been reading this week. I think I know which direction you're choosing.
I will tell you what you should not read this week.
Yes, okay.
my best friend, love her dearly, recommended that I read The Cruel Prince. She knew I wouldn't like it. I read it for her anyway because she was wanting to talk about it so much. It's a YA set in like a fae fantasy type setting, and the main character is one of the few humans of the royal family allowed. The whole reasoning is messed up already. But essentially, like, it's coming time for the king to step down. So they don't die; it's just step down, and the new king to be named. Falls to pieces. That part of the story is fine. The part of the story I cannot get behind is she has a classmate who is one of the princes named Carden, and he bullies her and torments her with his friend all throughout her entire life. He has never been nice to her once. She at one point actually kills a friend of his. Like it's a whole mess of a thing. And it's not even just like enemies to lovers. This is some full on like uh he is torturing her and she hates him for the longest time, and then all of a sudden she's like, oh, but he's kind of hot. And I'm like, no, he's not.
The worst.
Yeah. I was like, yeah. And from what I understand, the books do play into understanding that it's a very like toxic and manipulative relationship. Like it's not saying that it's great, which at least I can appreciate. But it's a level I have never seen before in a YA of just like he like psychologically tormented her and physically hurt her on several occasions throughout his like their adolescence. This concept that they can now be like hot and steamy lovers and rule Fae world together, it bothers me to no end, and I could not read another book of the series. I had to stop.
That sounds terrible. And it also sounds like terrible messaging for young adults as well, specifically. Like, I'm a grandma. You're a whole grown up. But young adults, like you're talking like 14 to 17-year-olds reading this type of thing. That's such terrible messaging. And I don't feel like writers are like the arbiter of moral truth and have to like portray healthy relationships, but that just sounds terrible.
Yeah. Like I'm all for messy, non lifelong relationships portrayed as like their one true love in YA romance. There is a level of like you think that that's how it's going to be when you're 17 and it's not. So I can appreciate that. I liked Twilight for the crazy hot mess that it was.
Right.
But when you look at like it it was trying to present it at the same level of questionably bad as Twilight in there, and I was like, this is not the same thing. This is two different things. Um, no, it's like the ultimate. He throws rocks at you because he likes you. Thing that we tell little girls, and it was to a degree that was upsetting. Mm-hmm. I did not enjoy it.
And I also like I this might sound even more toxic, but I don't even mind in ships where they're like, because of the context, they are physical enemies. Like I'm talking like the latest Star Wars one or whatever, where they're like on opposing sides. So there are battles and they fight each other with lightsabers, like that kind of stuff. Or, with Shadow and Bone. Not that that matters because nobody gets their way there unless, nobody gets their way there in my opinion, but whatever. Like I don't mind if there's like context and they are like representing two different ideals and they kind of clash forces on that basis and as such are like at war. I'm not necessarily reading that kind of thing. I'm not necessarily reading romance for a self-insert, and I don't mind people who do. I just don't. But as someone who is morally opposed to violence, I'm not reading a violent ship being like, oh, I suddenly can't self-insert because there's violence in here, because I wasn't reading it as a self-insert in the first place. You know what I mean? But in terms of what's going to draw me in and get me to root for them to be together, there has to be something positive or at least interesting that comes out of them being together. And if they're like just like gaslighting, emotionally manipulating, being rude, being awful, being the worst version of themselves together, what am I gaining out of them getting together? Like, I know books like this will sell me on like, oh, but they had, you know, like this, all this awful stuff, but they've got sexual tension to have hot sex. Well, you lost me there because I don't even want to read the sex. You know what I mean? Like, that's also not what I'm here for. I know I'm a prude, but like, you know, it is what it is. And there's all kinds of like toxic ship stuff that I will find interesting. It's just not that.
Oh yeah. So like, this is very much written to be self-insert. It's a more likable version of the stereotypical I'm a girl, I don't like to wear dresses, I want to carry a sword, I want to be the warrior woman. It's a more likable version of that, but it's still that same archetype. And it's still a self-insert of the independent woman in a romance, taking down the ruling class. Like, that's what this story is.
Honestly, I would like it better if it wasn't an independent woman ending up in this situation. Like, if you're going to go for it, go more the Stockholm Syndrome route, where it's like a damsel in distress and some sort of like little fragile type of thing who's like such a Pollyanna sweetheart. And then you've got this like asshole tough guy who just discovers a soft spot for it. Like, if you're going to do that, do that. Like, having like, oh, we're going to take down and tear down this strong independent woman. Like, nobody wants to read that. Well, apparently people do want to read that. I don't want to read that, but apparently I'm not the majority, so whatever. Well, Kate, I've kept you 5 minutes overtime ranting about a book that I didn't even read but have opinions about. So I apologize, but at least I'm on your side, you know?
As usual, it's fine.
Well, this time next week, I think we're going to have a positive Superman and Lois episode, negative Flash episode, and who knows what else.
I forgot it was coming back. I did not realize that Superman and Lois, I failed on the news front with that one.
Superman and Lois, I believe, is coming back next week. I'll fact check myself afterwards and then immediately forget. But we'll have some other episodes of things. I think this is around the time that all shows kind of return from war, so that's very exciting. And see you same time, same place next week.